And so it is. Hello, everybody. I am Kyle Corbly. I'll be your host today. We are going to be reviewing Hasketball. So let's get started. So Jordan was kind enough to, and brave enough, to donate some code to us. Let's take a look at it. So I'm going to fork this. That makes it so that I have a copy of this too. And then I'm going to clone it, which is going to put it on my computer. All right, now I got it too. Advanced. And it's this one. So I should be able to bundle install. Maybe just RSpec. There we go. All right, so we got a whole gaggle of green test passing. I love it. So let's pop the hood and take a look at the code. So first, let's take a look at the game hash. See what we got here. Looking good, looking good. Very nice, very nice. So one of the things that I see students mess up the most when you're getting started is not taking indentation and such seriously. That is like turning on hard mode for your code. So for example, if this game hash turned into that, maybe that, actually that's not legal Ruby. You do stuff like this, just keep this really inconsistent. Maybe that's over there, maybe that's over there. I can't tell you how many times a student goes, hey, I'm having a problem with my code, and I look at it and I see something like this. The reason that's hard mode for your code is this is so hard to read. How would you know where a problem is happening? Because it hides. So, oops. Let's try that again. So much better, easier to read. All right, now let's take a look at these methods. Beautiful. So the README says, let's see, what's the first one? Num points scored. All right, build a method, num points scored, that takes in an argument of a player's name and returns the number of points scored for that player. So what's the tricky thing about this? Who can tell me?
Like home and away teams.
Yeah, so we got to iterate through both of those to get the players. And that's what Jordan's got going on here. We have an each, and then inside of the each, we have an each. So we got loops on loops so that we can get, make sure that we're looking through all the different players. Let's take a look at this code. So we got game hash, and then each key. Interesting. Of each key and each entry. Jordan, why'd you choose each key and each entry?
I knew I wasn't supposed to do just each, but I didn't know how to do a method that was fancier than just each key or each entry.
Nice.
I guess also the each key it's a hash, so you want to make sure you're getting those labels, and each entry maybe corresponds to like indices or something like that.
So you can totally use each for these. That's fine. But with this one, what you're doing is you're getting this key and then you're looking up the value on that. That works too. I mean, we got these green tests, but I'll bet you could also do something like each entry, and then instead of looking that up, I bet we could do that, and I'll bet that works. Let's see. Nope, totally didn't. All right, so I'm looking at this. First gripe I have with it is this variable name. So in general, when you're iterating over something, we've got like plural, singular. Now, like, there's not really a singular for game hash, but we still want to use like descriptive words as best we can. So what is the thing that's this key? What's a word we could use to describe that?
Location.
Yeah, I like that. Location, home or away. So I'd probably do something like that. If I make that location and that location. Oop, something still didn't like about that. Still green? Still green. Location. Location.
You have the if statement
Yep.
equal to.
There we go.
No.
All right, so if we change that to location, then right away this starts reading a little bit better. So next thing I'm looking for, so for this one, player hash, let's take a look at what this is. That's this right here. Player hash is descriptive. That's exactly what it is. However, I'm going to caution you away from trying to put the name of the type in with the name of the variable. Any guesses why I care? Why I think that should just be player instead of player hash?
Because sometimes data types get mutated depending on what method you use.
Yep, might not be a hash. And so you're kind of setting yourself up to be a liar at some point in the future. And worst case scenario, like you think something is a hash because you named it that, and it actually isn't. It's actually an object. It's actually an array. It's actually something different. So try to just describe what it is. And if I do that, am I still green? Oop. Something I didn't like about that. Green. Ah, anybody see what happened when I changed that to player?
It's the same as the variable name you're passing in.
Same as the variable name that's being passed in. What is getting passed in?
String,
It is. That's the data type. What kind of information is it?
the name.
The stats.
It's the name. Takes in an argument of a player's name. So, not the player. We're not getting past the whole player whatever. It's really just their name. So if we make that player name, this is starting to read a little bit nicer now. And we're still green. Okay, so each one of these, yeah. Okay, cool. So instead of doing each key and each entry, we could probably just do each with these. What does each take in the little pipes for its block?
A key value pair.
Key value pair. So I can say each, and then I can say location, and then the other thing, what would we call the rest of this?
Team info.
Yeah, team info. I like that. Location, team info. And what's cool about that is now I don't need to look this up on the game hash anymore. Now I can say team info players and then each through that. And then for this one, I can each, and this players, well, players is an array, so that just has the one thing on it. And this is what I was talking about with plural singular. So now I've got these players that I'm eaching through, and so I get to use the singular for that here. You just get to call that player. Player name equals player name, return player points. That's pretty dope. Cool, so that's one way we could do this. Let's talk about how else we could have solved this problem. So we agree that the tricky thing about this is that if I have this like home and away, these different parts of this hash, then I have to like go through both of those. Now, here's a question I want you to get used to asking yourself when you're writing code. What would make this problem easier? Can you think of anything that would make it so that difficulty with the home and away hash? What do we wish
Helper
the data
method
looked like?
collecting players.
What was it?
Helper method collecting players.
Yeah, just put all the players in one place so that we can just look through that. That'd sure be nice. Is that possible? Well, I guess it is. So why don't I make a method called get players, and then I'm going to start by just trying to hard code this. We don't need to loop through immediately. And that's another thing that I want you to take away from this. You don't have to, your code doesn't need to look good to start with. It doesn't need to be like a beautiful solution to start with. Like every good programmer I know, your first run at a solution to something looks like shit. It's inefficient, it's hard to read, it's whatever. But get to green as fast as possible, but then you're only halfway there. Now you want to stay green while making the code better. Cool. So, all right, our gnarly solution is going to be to take the game hash, get the home, and then get the players from that, and just get that array. So I'll say home players is game hash at home at players, and then away players is the same thing but with away. So right now I should have arrays stored in both. I should have arrays stored in both of those. If I want to make these one array, what could I do?
You could like map or flat map or something.
Flat map would do that. There's actually an easier way than that.
Shovel.
That.
We could shovel. Yeah, I could iterate through this and shovel it into a new array. Lynn, what was that?
Concat.
Concat. That's the one that I like. So I could do something like all players equals home players dot concat away players. And then I can return all players. That should give me an array with all 10 players in it. Let's see if it does. So I'm going to throw a binding.pry right there. All right. What does get players give me? Hey, you know what that looks like? That looks like an array of 10 hashes. Well, shoot.
Does
I have-
Go
Go ahead.
Does shuffle only add one element to the end of the array?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, like the other way I could do that is do something like all players is an empty array, and then I could loop through Come on, there we go. I could loop through each of those players and do like all players shovel player, and then do the same thing with away players. That works. That's pretty similar to that like flat mappy kind of idea, but Ruby actually has this built into it already that'll do that for us. Come on. With concat. So there's a lot of things like concat. Any guesses where we could find things like concat?
Documentation.
Documentation. What documentation?
Depends on what data type you're trying to operate on.
Cool. So concat is with arrays. I have this home players array. So what documentation am I going to look up?
Ruby arrays.
Yeah, sure. So if I just look up Ruby arrays, class array. All right. What methods are on that? Hey, weird. There's concat. Appends the elements of other array to self. And if I want to find out the other things that I can do with arrays, hey, look at all these. I can sort, I can reverse, I can rotate. Anybody know what array rotation is?
Doesn't it take
Go for it, Logan.
the element, and depending on which direction, whether it's a positive or a negative integer that you feed to it, it moves it that many spaces around?
Yep. So if I have 4, 5, 6, and I rotate it once, I get 6, 4, 5. Just yep. Cool. So we have all these different things that we can do with arrays. Now, here's the gotcha on this. You know what I don't see on here? I don't see, oh no, they included on there. There's some things that come in through enumerable that are exactly the same with arrays and hashes. And so sometimes you want to take a look at this included modules. And it'll have these things, which might not be in that documentation. But good call. All right, so I can get the players. So now that I can get players, how might I rewrite the num points scored method to take advantage of it?
Well, first you'd have to call get players in your method.
I like it. So I say all players is get players. Okay, done. Now what?
So you can get rid of the whole game hash.each line. And then you're going to do the all players. And then in there you can do player or .each, sorry.
Okay.
And then you're going to do a do. And then in your lines you've got just player, because you've got one player at a time.
Good.
And then it's just an if player name, or if player bracket name, and then you're good.
Something like this. Cool.
Yep.
Let's see if you stayed green. Stayed green. Very cool. So that's a little bit more elegant than what we had before. I think we can do even better than this.
So quick question. When you do .each on an array, you only need one argument?
Exactly, because the key in that would actually be the index, and we don't get that with each. We just get the value. So you might have done a lab that described each as the unexpressive enumerable. Can anybody think of a more expressive one that we could use?
Find or select.
Find or select. I like that. What's the difference between find and select?
Nothing.
The name.
Ooh. There's a difference.
There is.
Find only grabs
only
one.
returns the
Select
first
grabs
one.
Yep,
all.
I heard it. Find only grabs one. Select will give you every match. And based on that, you can probably make a guess at the types. Find is going to give you whatever the matching type is. Select will always give you an array, even if there's only one thing in there. So let's try this with find. If I do all players dot find, I can take this if condition because it kind of works the same way. And what's going to come back from this find?
The entire player element of hash.
Correct. Like whichever one matches, whichever like the found player was. We call that like matched player. And if I have the matched player points. Not match array, matched player. Very nice. All right, did we say green? We stayed green. Look at that code. That's tight. That's certainly a lot better than all those nested loops. And we could even tighten this up. Now, what I'm about to do, don't do this at home. This is dangerous. But if we think of that as like the long way to do this, you can also like really shorten this up quite a bit. So instead of doing this all players, I could do get players directly here. And then instead of like saving that into a variable and then getting its points, all right, did it work? It worked. We're still green. And since this is kind of short, we don't even need the do end. We could do that with curlies on one line. And we're still green. Did the whole stupid thing in one line. So I said don't try this at home because that's actually not very good code. It's not a contest to see who can use the least characters, the least number of lines or something. This explains itself a lot better. It's a lot easier to understand what my intention with this code was than it was when I tried to get super clever. And so you'll see in Ruby in particular, people tend to do things mostly like that. Although I didn't hate those curlies. I'm going to bring those back. That's pretty good. Ask me some questions about this.
So I had a helper method that returned the hash of the player you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
And so the actual methods are pretty much all one line.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend I not do that?
No, that's great. So let's do that.
But I thought the one-liners were bad.
No, clever one-liners are bad. I'm doing like 3 different things in this one line, and I just jammed it all into one line because I could. That's
Okay.
what's wrong. Yeah, if I did a get player helper method that takes in a player name and really just does this part of it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Also don't need the variable name there now.
Yeah, and I didn't have the bit where you made the whole list. Just in that one helper thing, I went through both, so you only have to do it once.
Yeah. So for this one, now, since we're doing all of that, I can do something like get player and then pass in the player name. Come on now. And get their points. And holy shit, we can get rid of all of that. That's beautiful. Does it work? Yep, something I didn't like. Undefined method, all players. Ah, this needs to be get players. All right, stayed green. Not bloody bad. Even this get players, we can start cleaning that up too. Anytime you're just saving something to a variable and then returning it, don't do that. Ruby implicitly returns the last line anyway, so we can just do something like that. And green. What's up?
When you wrote the get player function, you can just write the arguments without parentheses.
Correct.
Okay.
I'd say in general, Ruby folk don't like using the parentheses when they don't have to. There are some times where you have to. For example, here, because I wanted to like immediately work with the result of that, you have to have the parentheses there. If you do something like that, what am I saying there?
Is it trying to call the points on play?
It's something like that. It's trying to like pass in that as an argument. It doesn't know. And so the parentheses help Ruby figure out that you're trying to call points on the result of this. But most of the time you don't need it, and Ruby folk usually leave it off when you're doing something like that. That's not the case in many languages, by the way. It's not the case in JavaScript. It's not the case in C. It's not the case in Python. A lot of things where that's not the case, but you can do it in Ruby.
Is it frowned upon to include them to make it easier to transition between languages?
Yes. Ruby, this is like maybe my biggest gripe with Ruby, is that there are so many ways to do the exact same thing. Which is not the case in a lot of languages. In fact, Python as a goal has the exact opposite. There should only be one correct way to do everything. Now, that said, we have this huge plurality of options for how to write our Ruby. Ruby people tend to not use those. The Rails community in particular, like, has, I'd say, like, zeroed in on like a set of standards that they kind of want all Rails people to adhere to, and leaving off the parentheses when you can get away with it is one of them. Just probably do that there too. Other questions?
Does shortening your code and writing like helper methods help when you're dealing with a gigantic amount of data?
Yes. It's not like more efficient or anything, but it's certainly easier to read, and so it's easier to debug also.
Do you think, like, in the context of a course like this, where we're doing like web development stuff, we should be worrying at all about, I don't know, thinking about how many times you're looking up the hash, or like how much like time that takes, or, you know, or should we be focused more on like readability, since you're probably not going to be having gigantic hashes?
Always focus on readability, and then like fix performance on something when it becomes a problem. So the idea there is there's a thing called premature optimization that bad developers do, where they go, I'm going to make this code as efficient as possible. And the problem with that is they usually mangle the readability and overcomplicate the architecture. And then they have this really like super performant code, ... that was never the problem to begin with. Like there's every app has a bottleneck. It's the thing that's keeping it from running more quickly. And if you do premature optimizations, you're probably optimizing the wrong part of your app. And so while I wouldn't get like too crazy with trying to write like the sloppiest code possible, readability beats performance like almost every time. More questions so far?
When you were doing the each on the hash, is there a reason you didn't do each pair?
Where this?
Yeah.
Oh, the each. Oh, I mean like an each pair method.
Yeah.
Because each is simpler.
They essentially do the exact same thing when you're on a hash. It's just like more words that you're putting in. Is that basically it?
Maybe. I don't know. Let's see, Ruby hash. Let's take a look at the docs.
I mean, at least in the example that they have right underneath it, it looks like you don't even need to write there for it to consider it.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's probably the same shit. That's my guess.
Okay.
Ah, yeah, no, it is. It's literally the same method. Yep, works the same way. And Ruby has a lot of those kinds of things. So the reason why a language would do something like that is expressiveness. And what they mean by expressiveness is even if it's trying to do the same thing mechanically under the hood, your intention with it might be different, just semantically. And so they try to give you like a variety of different words you can like use to express yourself. For example, when you have an array, like this, you could do something like that, and that's fine. But you can also do something like that that probably describes like what your intention is a lot in a much more clear way. But they do the same thing. Like all the dot first method does is return the zero index of an array. So that's why they'll have more than one method, more than one name for the same method.
So select returns an array.
Always.
And, right. And even if it's only one element and the zero element is a hash, correct, is there a way to kind of just get rid of that outer layer array without doing the dot first?
Nope.
Okay.
All right, so let's take a look at this next one, shoe size. So given what we learned in the last method, what do you think we could do to improve that?
Well, with our get player thing, we could just do get player with the player name and then shoe.
Yep, I like it. Make that player name also. Let's get rid of the parentheses. And if I comment all the rest of that out, do we stay green? We stay green! That's another reason to write these helper methods. Like, they make so many of these problems, like, just trivial. Cool. Let's take a look at the next one. Team colors. I see your team colors shining through. Takes in an argument of the team name and returns an array of that team's colors. So again, we're calling this team, but if I'm getting a team, I'm expecting that to either be something like a hash or an object or all of the things that go along with the team. A team is a complicated thing. So I'm expecting that you're giving me a complicated thing when you name that variable team. If I call it team name, you don't even need to call it team name string for me to like make a pretty good guess that's going to be a string. Oops. No, come on, stop it. There we go. All right, so if I change those, do we stay green? We stay green. All right, let's take a look at this. So we're eaching through. This is a good example of like staying consistent with your formatting. I could probably like let that one slide, but whatever you do, stay consistent on it. Really helps as you're scanning the code. Okay, so let's fix this name too. We were calling that location. So that should be location, and that should be location. Did we stay green? We stayed green. Now, let's make this so that we're doing the each so we can get the value out of it. So we were calling that team info. And we can do that with, let's see, D2. Like team info, team name, and then game hash at location. That's also just team info. So if we make all those changes, does it stay green? It stays green. Very nice. Let's think about how we could make this better. So we're looping through the hash, and then we're looking for a matching team, and then we're returning their colors. How can I make this better?
Do another find.
Love it. Do the exact same thing we were doing with players. So maybe I make a method called getTeam that takes in a team name. And I can just copy all this over. And now instead of returning their colors, I just return the team info. Hey, that's pretty slick. So now I can say get team, give it the team name, and then get its colors. I barely even had to rewrite anything. And we're still green. That's called method extraction. So when you have a method that's doing more than one thing, try to isolate what those different things are and pull those out into their own methods. Because here's the other benefit of that. Look how much better that reads. It's not just shorter, it practically says what the thing is doing. That's a lot easier when you're scanning than to try to parse that shit out.
So just a question, does this all kind of go back to like readability and debugging, and if you have any problems with your code, you can really easily say like, oh, this is what's happening?
Absolutely. Because when we started this, it was green. It already worked. We haven't changed anything about this other than making it more readable, which makes it more extensible. So next week, when we get 5 other things we have to do with this data set, Now we're building a little library of tools that'll help us with this. This helps for communicating with other developers. You're going, hey, I'm having a hard time with this. Can you come take a look? That's a lot easier to have a conversation about. And like there can be performance benefits and whatever else, but yeah, it's extensibility, it's readability, it's debuggability, it's testability. All of those things are improved once you've got it green, really work on making the code rock. Cool. Team names. That operates on the game hash to return an array of the team names. So game hash has these things. We got to go into the home and away and then pull out those team names and then throw them into an array. So let's take a look at how Jordan solved this. Jordan made an empty array and then pushed these two team names into it and then returned the array. It's not bad. And also, you'll find that I'm pretty anti-code comment. This is not a bad one though. So the reason that I don't like code comments is you create two sources of truth. You have what the code does and what you say it does. And over time, those tend to not stay the same. And the first time you see a code comment that ends up being a lie, now you can't trust any of the code comments. So I generally stay away from them, except when you're doing something kind of weird. If you're doing something kind of weird, you should probably explain what you're doing. So in this case, the fact that we're hard coding these values, it's a little unusual. So that comment explains why. It's pretty good. Because yeah, there's always going to be a home team and an away team. There's not going to be a third team playing a basketball game. So I like that. Now, you'll find that Ruby people tend to stay away from push in favor of
Shovels.
Shovels. So we can take that and just shovel it. And did it stay green? By Jove, it stayed green. So next thing I notice about this is that this res, that's presumably supposed to be something like result. I know the instructions said really got you off to a great start right up front with this num points scored shit. Hate that variable name. You don't have to talk like a computer, like in a movie, to be a programmer. But so many programmers do this shit. Why num points scored instead of number points scored, or points scored count, or number of points scored? It doesn't run any more efficiently. It's not any easier to type, really. So I call those programmer abbreves. And I'd recommend that just avoid them like the plague. There's no good reason to do a programmer abbrev ever. So say the whole word. Now that we have result in here, my next issue with result is that it's very abstract, but we're doing a very specific thing. So we could just as easily call this team names. And now we're being way more specific about what's going in here. And we stay green. Next thing that you could do is if I'm just going to shovel these things into this array, I wonder, can I just put them in the array to start with? Maybe like that? I wonder. Stayed green. And even better, if I'm just going to save this in a variable and then immediately return it, like that. Can I do that? Stayed green. Lots of different ways to solve this stuff. Questions?
So a quick question, like how would the method be called, and without any pointers that this array is being returned and seen from the side?
So how does this return? How do I know what that's bringing back?
Say that again.
How do I know what this is bringing back? Because I'm not saving that anywhere. The tests are green, so it works. Why?
Yeah, that's my question. How?
Implicit return.
Who knows?
Yeah, Ruby has the implicit return.
Implicit return. So even though this is on 4 lines, it's all one statement. I could just as easily make it that. And Ruby methods will always implicitly return whatever the last statement is.
Do you have to put that comma at the end, or is that just an optional at the end of your
This
second
is
item?
optional. So you can do it like that, but here's why I'd recommend adding these. They're called trailing commas. The thing that's good about trailing commas is now I can reorder it like that. If I do it the other way, where I do it like this, I want to do these in a different order actually. Womp womp. Now I need to add it there and then remove it there. It's a pain in the ass. So most languages support trailing commas. Use them when you can because it makes that so much easier. Let's take a look at this. Player numbers. Takes in an argument of a team name. So let's fix that to team name. All right. And returns an array of the jersey numbers for that team. So I see this res here. Let's call this jersey numbers. All right, did it stay green? Stayed green. All right, so this is taking in a team name. Ooh, I have this get team thing. So I could say something like matching team is get team name, like that. All right. So then that's the thing that I want to, and I want to iterate over their players. So I could go matching team players and then get rid of all the rest of this. So I each do those and then push each player's number into the array. See if it's still green. Still green. So we can make this each. And instead of calling that player hash, don't include the type. Just call it player. All right, does that still work? It still works. So let's see, how else how else could I make this
Change
go?
push to shovel.
Yeah, why not? So if I shovel that, okay, still green. So I'm taking an array of players and I want to turn them into an array of jersey numbers. So I'll have 5 players. I end up with 5 jersey numbers.
Map.
That's a map. If I'm going same number to same number but different, that's a map. So I can say, I want to map over this, map over the players, and then I want to return player number. And that will give me an array of 5 jersey numbers like that. Does it stay green? It stays green. And as we've discussed, if I'm just going to save something in a variable and then immediately return it, fuck it. I could just do that. Okay, still green.
Would you also suggest putting it all onto one line with curly braces since it's so short?
Yeah, I think that's a good candidate for that. So let's turn that into that. And that into that. Still green. Looking good, looking good. Instead of looking up the players here, I could probably also just make this, just call that players. Add the these like that. Ooh, this is starting to get better. Nice, nice. Still some opportunities for improvement here. This feels like this should maybe be a standalone thing. So I could call that like get players that takes in a team name. And then just returns their players. And now this can be get players dot map. All right, is it still green? Oops, something I didn't like about that.
You already have the get
Oh,
players
I need to
method.
pass in the team name. Yep, something I didn't like about that.
You already have a get players method.
Oh, do I? Oh, we can call this get players by team. I like that. All right, we're green. All right. And now here's a trick that you can do with map that is dope as hell. So anytime that you're mapping over something and all you want to do is pull a some property off of it, you can invoke map with parentheses, and then it's curly Q like that. I think that works. It's been a while. Oops, someone didn't like. Shit, I could have sworn that was it. So I'm gonna look that up. Ruby.
Pretzel colon.
What was that?
I kept running into this, like looking up stuff, and they call it pretzel colon.
Yeah, that's right, pretzel. Yeah, that's exactly how it's supposed to work.
It likes doing that for classes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You need to do it with an object. That's why this won't work, because it's just a hash. All right. Never mind. Forget I said anything. But yeah, certainly got that down. This used to look like. Used to look like that. And now. That's cleaner. Easier to talk about. Questions?
Your cursor is on line 174, and then up and down it starts at 1 and goes.
Great question. So these are called relative line numbers. They're helpful for me because if I want to go 5 up so that I'm on that end line, I type 5K and then I just jump there. But I can always turn them on and off. So if you find yourself like, hey, can you show the regular line numbers real quick? I can turn those on too.
Under player numbers, team name, you currently have Jet players.
That won't work. Always green, always green. Questions?
This video will be available today after this lecture or lesson.
Thank you. And probably. I'm a little backed up right now. I'm going to try to get these up quick. There's like 5 of these on the site, though. And that's pretty much the same thing every time.
But this one's super dope.
The other ones are super dope, too. But yeah, I'll try to get this one up quick. Any other questions? Cool. Thank you.